Hello and welcome back to Focus Atlanta. Thanks so much for continuing to watch. We're going to close out the show talking a little bit about boundaries, healthy boundaries. In fact, I'm here with Melissa Doman.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I've really been looking forward to this.
Thanks for making it time. I think that sometimes we attribute boundaries only to the workspace or only to our home life. But you're
Yeah.
telling us that we need boundaries in both.
Oh, yes. And, I will say that it's easier said than done. We can be honest about that. But having boundaries in a variety of spaces and even boundaries around behaviors, the information we take in, despite the fact that, human beings are incredibly hardy creatures. We do have our limits in terms of how much we take in, how often we take in, how many times we're exposed to something. And if we don't have those boundaries in place, the effects on us, it's a slow creep up. And then all of a sudden you're like, how did I get here? So it's really important across a variety of spaces.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think that sometimes we don't recognize that in kind of crazy political landscapes, we really need to focus on our boundaries. Can we talk about that a little?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. Yes, please go ahead.
I think that sometimes we see things on the news or we're taking in so much information, but then when we get in our private spaces, we're regurgitating a little bit of this and we're taking in a little bit of that, and the lines get really really blurry. What can we do?
So I want to address something that you mentioned first, where we start regurgitating some of the information towards, we'll call them unwilling victims. But there is actually a term for that. So it's called the stress footprint. So if we're taking in all this information, all this stimuli, if you think about us as a fixed container, that energy needs to go somewhere. So if we can't keep it within ourselves, and we shouldn't anyway, because it's not healthy, we basically look towards an outlet and go, boom, and put it towards them. Maybe sometimes under the guise of, well, you need to know this, which in some cases, absolutely, absolutely true. In other cases, it's, I'm going to internally combust if I don't put this towards someone else. And so if we think about what we can do in terms of, taking in that information and also what we do with it, I am a huge fan of time boxing our exposure to information. Now, whether that's the news, whether that's social media, whether it's both, I think putting a time box around how often you are exposed to that information is an easy habit that people can start immediately. I practice this myself. I certainly wouldn't recommend something I don't do personally. So I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. Of course, there are. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world where some days you need to flex that because, gestures to everything and look at our reality. But in general, time boxing your exposure to that information will not only benefit your mental health, your physical health, but also those people around you that you tend to share that information with.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any tips that we might use to recognize when we are in information overload? I mean, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like I think that
yes.
sometimes we think that that's what's happening, but we don't really know how to gauge it.
Oh, yeah. So typically speaking, it's a common word, stress, but I think it's important people understand that stress actually is not inherently negative. It's when we encounter a stimulus that requires adjustment or response. That's what stress is. But when we have too much bad stress or even too much good stress, which will be a conversation for another day, we need to do something with it. If we don't, it can turn up in about five ways. So emotionally, cognitively, physically, socially, professionally. Now, what I recommend is that people know what their average baseline looks like. Now, there's a fancy model that helps people look at this called the Yerkes-Dodson law, Yerkes hyphen Dodson. It's basically looking at the optimal levels of, stress, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but it can really help people recognize what their tipping point looks like, and if they're going into overstimulation or in some cases, understimulation. Now, for overstimulation, as the model shows it as, quote, the red zone, the way you can see this is, are my emotions looking a bit more negative? Am I getting stuck in them more often? Am I having more irritability? Am I having cognitive fog, trouble organizing my thoughts or how I prioritize tasks? Am I noticing that I'm avoiding certain emotions, certain behaviors? Are my social engagement levels changing? Am I becoming more of a recluse? Am I pinging people more often because I can't stand the sound of my own thoughts? Am I getting physical pain? Am I having stress nightmares? Do I have IBS all of a sudden? All of these are signs and warning signals that your brain and your nervous system are telling you, what is going on out there? This is why we can't have nice things. I will do these things till you listen to me. And when you don't, is when we start, getting into mental health trouble, physical health trouble, and in some cases, social health trouble.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Thank you so much for coming on the show, Melissa. The
Sure.
website for your newest book has been up there. We appreciate your time. Thank you for making it a little easier for us to grasp and understand. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, a total pleasure. Anytime I can help, please don't hesitate to ask.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Again, you have the website there. Please take the opportunity to go visit, get the newest book. We can do this. It seems a little daunting, but it doesn't have to be completely overwhelming. Sometimes all you need is a little education. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to this week's episode of Focus Atlanta. I hope to see you next Sunday here on CBS Atlanta.